Hey guys, welcome back. My name is Anand Guru and I'm here to help you clear your next cybersecurity job interview. In this session, we'll be discussing about vendor neutral SIM questions. More of vendor specific SIM questions like IBM Curadar and Splunk will be discussed in later modules. So let's dive in. What is SIM? SIM stands for Security Information and Event Management. It is a security management solution that helps in collecting, parsing, and correlating events from various log sources. Why do we need SIM? The same question can be asked as when we have security solutions like antivirus, firewall, IPS, why do we need SIM? Various security solutions that we use to protect our network and data work in isolation. However, in order to detect today's sophisticated attacks, it would be helpful if we could correlate information from various devices. This correlation is provided by SIM. Antivirus, firewall, IPS are all preventive technologies, whereas SIM is mostly used for detection and analysis. We also need SIM for regulatory compliances. What are the popular SIM vendors? According to Gartner's Magic Quadrant, the leaders in SIM market are Splunk Enterprise Security, IBM Curadar, Exabeam, Securonics, Logarithm, RSA Security Analytics. Although not in the leaders quadrant, Micro Focus ArcSight is one of the most widely used SIM solution. What is parsing? Parsing is the process of converting unstructured data into structured format. It is during parsing where SIM extract all the useful metadata like source IP, destination IP, username, file hash, etc. from the logs. Let's take this example of a raw log which is generated for a failed login attempt. When this log reaches up to the SIM and undergoes parsing, the useful information, that is metadata, will be extracted and presented like this, wherein we see the username as root, source IP address as 218.49183.17, source port as 49869, and protocol as SSH. What is normalization? Normalization is a process of bringing all events into one common structure to deliver a homogeneous view. It could be time normalization, that is, bringing all the various devices from different geolocations to a common time zone, or it could also be identifying common event attributes. For example, categorizing all login logout events as authentication. In some SIM solutions, normalization is equal to parsing. What is aggregation? Also, the same question can be asked as what is the use of aggregation? It is a process of merging similar logs that occur over a period of time. For example, if there are 20 failed login events by a user on a server, the server would generate 20 logs. But instead of storing all the 20 logs, SIM will only store one record. Aggregation greatly helps in conserving the disk space on SIM and also increases its performance. Let's take this example where there are 9 failed login events between 8:28 p.m. to 8:29 p.m. When these 9 logs reaches up to SIM and undergo aggregation, SIM will only store one single record. However, in order to represent the number of events that it has originally received, most of the SIM solution have a field called as event count. In this case, event count will be 9. What is correlation? Correlation can be defined as a set of conditions that indicates a suspicious activity. For example, user activity during non-business hours, VPN logins from multiple geolocations, multiple malwares on the same host. What are the different collection methods available in SIM solution? These question can be asked in various ways. For example, how do you onboard Windows event logs? What are the log sources you have onboarded so far? Now, this table represents the widely used collection methods and supported by most of the SIM vendors. This table is really important and probably more than 20 different questions can be asked from this table. So let's look into the collection methods. WMI, Windows Management Instrumentation. It is used to collect Windows event logs, for example, application, system, and security logs. The second widely used collection method is syslog. Most of the network devices and security solution are onboarded using the collection method of syslog. For example, routers, switches, firewall, proxy, etc. Flat file collection method. Application and servers that write logs onto a flat file can be collected using flat file collection method. For Windows, it is CIF. For Linux, it is NFS. Example of Windows flat file collection methods log sources include DNS and DHCP. For NFS, we have Apache logs and Linux logs. Most of the SIM vendors also have an agent-based collection method. IBM QRadar agent is called as WinCollect. McAfee ESM agent is called as SIM Collector agent. And for Splunk, it is called as Universal Forwarder. Various log sources including Windows event logs, flat file logs, etc. can be collected using agent-based collection method. The agent sits on the log source, collects the necessary logs and sends the logs to the SIM. Then comes API-based collection method. Usually cloud logs and thread feeds are onboarded using API method. For example, AWS CloudTrail logs. And we have DB collectors like JDBC and ODBC. Obviously, these are used to collect database logs. For example, MySQL audit logs, McAfee EPO, Oracle DB audit logs, etc. Now, from this table, I said various questions can arise. For example, there might be a question on how do you onboard Palo Alto logs. Now, Palo Alto is a firewall, therefore, I onboard it using syslog, right? So, moving on, what are pull and push collection methods? A pull method of collecting logs means the SIM is actively involved in collecting the logs, usually by logging into the log source. This is done at regular frequency. Example, WMI, flat file, DB collectors and API are all pull collection methods. In push method, the logs are pushed by the log source and SIM just listens and on the assigned port and the IP address. Example, syslog and agent-based collection methods are push. Pull and push are sometimes referred to as active and passive collection methods, respectively. Few questions on syslog collection method might include: what is the default port for syslog? For syslog, it is 514. For TLS syslog, it is encrypted syslog, it is 6514. Is syslog TCP or UDP? It has both TCP and UDP versions. While purchasing a SIM, how do you size it? Alternately, this question can be asked: how will you decide the capacity of the SIM you need? SIM sizing is done in two different ways depending on the vendor. Either it can be calculated as events per second or size of data indexed per day. There are a couple of methods that we can adopt in order to calculate the required EPS. First method is we can set up a proof of concept and onboard few log sources of each type and measure the EPS. Later, we can multiply by appropriate number of devices. For example, if we had 200 Windows log sources and one Windows log source during POC generated 10 EPS, we will need 2000 EPS. The second method of identifying the EPS count would be to use the vendor provided spreadsheet calculator and feed in all the data like number of Windows log sources, number of DNS, number of routers and switches, number of firewalls, etc. This will give an approximate EPS. To be on a safer side, we should keep an extra buffer of 20 to 30%. Now, this works well for all these SIM solutions that sell their licensing based on EPS. However, there are certain SIM solutions that will sell their licenses based on data indexed per day. So in order to calculate the data indexed per day from the EPS, we follow this method. So in order to calculate the amount of data indexed, most SIM vendors will typically assume one event is roughly equal to 400 bytes for all the log sources, and for Windows it will be 1 KB. That is, if we have 300 log sources that generate 10 EPS each, then EPS will be 3000, and the amount of data indexed will be 3000 into 400 bytes. That comes up to around 1,200,000 bytes per second. Converting that into per day, that is multiplied by 60 for minutes, 60 for hours, and 24 for 1 day, roughly comes up to around 103 GB per day. How long should we retain logs in SIM? The retention is usually defined by the regulatory compliance. Like PCI defines that the raw logs must be stored for 1 year with the last 3 months available in a easily accessible storage. Parsed events should be retained for 90 days. Parsed events are typically used for analysis and reporting. It is very rare that we do analysis of events older than 90 days. Raw logs as a best practice can be stored for 1 year if there is no regulatory compliance being followed. How frequently should you take SIM backup? It is recommended to schedule the SIM backup for every 7 days. However, we should take manual backup every time we are making major changes or upgrading. How do you troubleshoot if any log source is not sending the logs? The non-reporting log sources are also called as silent log sources. In order to troubleshoot a silent log source, we need to identify where the issue exists in the log flow. A typical log flow includes the log source, the network, and obviously some associated collection method, then the collection, parsing, and storage. Collection, parsing, and storage happens in SIM. Now, if the issue is at the log source side, it could be like, say, some misconfiguration. The administrator might have entered the wrong IP address or port number, necessary services are not running, or it might be incorrect logging level. That's when the issue is at the log source side. Then the issue could be at the network level. We can identify this by running packet capture on the collector. TCP dump for Linux based collectors and Wireshark for Windows based collectors. The command for TCP dump is TCP dump minus VVNNI ETH0 host followed by the IP address of the log source that we are troubleshooting. The issue could be with collecting and parsing. We need to check appropriate services are running and check the log files for any errors in SIM. Finally, it could be the SIM database issue, which means the logs are being collected, parsed, and stored, but UI is unable to query the DB. Usually, a reboot would fix such issues. If none of this helps, we should be contacting the vendor technical assistance center. What is list or watch list or reference sets? Different vendors call it with different names. List is a collection of similar type of elements like a list of IP addresses, list of admin users, etc. List can be used in filters and correlation rules. Examples of lists are like, say, list of admin users and list of all the public IP addresses that the company owns. List of all the service accounts. Lists are heavily used to integrate threat intelligence with SIM. That's all for this session. Let's meet on the next module. Thank you.